September 17, 1944, somewhere in eastern France, near the German border, Private First Class Joseph Martinez was 23 years old. He'd been in Europe for 4 months. He'd landed in Normandy in June, fought through the breakout in July, pushed across France in August. Now, in September, his unit, Company B, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Infantry Regiment, was approaching the German border. The war felt like it was ending. Paris had been liberated. German forces were retreating. American soldiers were talking about being home by Christmas, but war doesn't end cleanly. And September 17, 1944, would prove that. Joseph's company was part of a larger advance. The plan was to secure a series of bridges across a small river. The Americans called it the Vosen River. Though that wasn't its real name, the bridges were crucial. Without them, the advance would stall. Tanks couldn't cross rivers without bridges. Supply trucks couldn't cross without bridges. Company B's objective was Bridge 7, a small stone bridge, maybe 40 feet long, crossing a river maybe 30 feet wide. Not a major bridge, not strategically significant in the grand scheme of the war. Just one of dozens of bridges that needed to be secured. The company approached the bridge at 600 hours. The area seemed quiet. No German forces visible. Reconnaissance suggested the Germans had already retreated. Captain William Harrison, the company commander, sent First Lieutenant Robert Chen and a platoon to secure the bridge. Joseph was part of that platoon, 36 men, standard infantry tactics, scouts forward, main force behind, support weapons covering. They reached the bridge at Tanxier-en-Fives. Still quiet. The bridge was intact. The Germans hadn't blown it up. That was good news. It meant the advance could continue. Lieutenant Chen ordered the platoon to cross and establish a defensive perimeter on the far side. Standard procedure. Secure the objective, hold it until the main force arrives. Joseph was in the 3rd squad to cross. He reached the far side of the bridge at 0622. The area was a small village, maybe 20 buildings, stone houses, narrow streets, fields beyond, everything quiet, too quiet. At 0625, German artillery opened fire. The first shells landed in the village. Joseph dove for cover behind a stone wall. Explosions, shrapnel, dust. The noise was overwhelming. Then machine gun fire. From the east. From buildings Joseph's platoon hadn't cleared yet. Germans had been waiting, hidden, letting the Americans walk into a trap. The platoon tried to fall back, but German fire was too intense. Men were getting hit, wounded, killed. Lieutenant Chen was shouting orders, but half the platoon couldn't hear him over the explosions. Captain Harrison, still on the near side of the bridge, was on the radio, calling for artillery support, calling for reinforcements. But artillery takes time. Reinforcements take time. The platoon on the far side of the bridge didn't have time. At 0630, Lieutenant Chen made a decision. He ordered the platoon to retreat back across the bridge. It was the only way. Staying on the far side meant getting destroyed. The platoon began falling back. Suppressive fire, covering each other, moving in pairs. Combat drills they'd practiced 1,000 times. Joseph was near the rear of the platoon. His squad was supposed to provide covering fire while the other squads withdrew. He was crouched behind rubble, firing his M1 Garand at German positions. He couldn't see Germans, just muzzle flashes, shapes in windows. He fired anyway. His squad leader, Sergeant Miller, shouted, "Martinez, fall back, we're moving." Joseph turned to run. That's when he saw it. Germans, lots of Germans, coming from the south, not from the village, from a different direction entirely, at least a company, maybe more. Moving fast, trying to cut off the American retreat. If those Germans reached the bridge before the platoon finished crossing, everyone on the far side would be trapped, killed or captured. Joseph didn't think. He just acted. He ran toward the bridge. Not away from the Germans, toward them. He had grenades, 6 of them, fragmentation grenades, M2s, standard American grenades. He pulled the pin on the first grenade. counted to 2, threw it at the advancing Germans. The explosion stopped the German advance, just for a second. But a second was enough. Joseph pulled another grenade, threw it, another explosion. Sergeant Miller saw what Joseph was doing. He shouted, "Martinez, get back here! That's an order!" But Joseph couldn't get back. The Germans were too close now. If he ran, they'd shoot him. If he stayed, maybe he could slow them down. Give the platoon time to cross the bridge. He threw his third grenade, then his fourth. The Germans went to ground, taking cover, returning fire, but they weren't advancing, not yet. Lieutenant Chen's platoon finished crossing the bridge at 0638. 36 men had crossed initially, 22 made it back. 14 were dead, wounded, or missing. Joseph Martinez was missing. Captain Harrison ordered engineers to prepare to blow the bridge. If Germans controlled the far side, the bridge was useless. Better to destroy it than let Germans use it. But Sergeant Miller stopped them. "Sir, Martinez is still over there. He's holding the approach, keeping Germans from rushing the bridge." Harrison looked through binoculars. He could see the far side of the bridge, could see German soldiers taking cover, could see occasional grenade explosions, one man holding back what looked like hundreds of Germans. Harrison made a decision. "Hold the demolition. We're not blowing that bridge while Martinez is alive." The engineers looked uncertain. "Sir, if the Germans take the bridge, they're not taking it. Not while I have that man keeping them back." But the situation was desperate. German forces controlled the village. More Germans were arriving. And Joseph Martinez, one American soldier with nothing but grenades, was the only thing stopping them from swarming across the bridge. Joseph knew he was in trouble. He'd thrown all 6 of his grenades in the first 3 minutes. He had his rifle, 48 rounds, his pistol, 15 rounds, and that was it. German soldiers were maybe 50 yards away, taking cover behind buildings, behind walls, behind rubble. They weren't attacking yet. They'd learned that advancing meant getting grenades thrown at them, but they were organizing, bringing up more men, bringing up machine guns. Joseph found good cover. A stone wall, maybe 3 feet high, solid. It protected him from direct fire. But it wouldn't protect him if Germans flanked him, and they would flank him, eventually. He looked back at the bridge. It was maybe 30 yards behind him. He could run, make it across. Probably, but if he ran, Germans would rush the bridge, and the Americans on the far side weren't ready. They were still reorganizing, still treating wounded, still calling for reinforcements. Joseph made a decision. He would stay, as long as he could, give the Americans time. He didn't think he'd survive, but survival wasn't the priority. The priority was time. At 0640, German soldiers tried to advance again. Joseph fired his M1, single shots, aimed shots. He'd been trained as a marksman. He hit what he aimed at. 3 Germans fell. The rest took cover. That bought 2 minutes. At 0642, a German machine gun opened fire, MG-42. The sound was distinctive, like ripping cloth, fast, deadly. Bullets hit the wall Joseph was hiding behind. Stone fragments flew, but the wall held. Joseph couldn't see the machine gun position, but he knew where it was from the sound. He fired 3 shots in that direction. The machine gun stopped. Either he'd hit the gunner or the gunner had moved. That bought 1 minute. At 0643, Joseph heard shouting in German. Orders. They were preparing for another advance. He had maybe 30 rounds left in his rifle. Not enough, not nearly enough. But then something unexpected happened. American artillery opened fire. Shells began landing on the far side of the bridge. Not on Joseph's position. The artillery was being careful, but on German positions in the village, on the approaches, on anywhere Germans might be assembling. The artillery barrage lasted 5 minutes. It was devastating. Buildings collapsed, streets cratered. The German advance stopped completely. When the barrage ended, Joseph could hear German wounded screaming. He could see smoke rising from the village. The immediate threat was gone, but it would come back. Germans don't quit easily. They'd reorganize. They'd attack again. Joseph checked his ammunition. 24 rounds in his rifle, 15 rounds in his pistol. No grenades, not enough, not for what was coming. At 700, Captain Harrison received reinforcements. Another company, 2 platoons, additional machine guns, a weapon squad with mortars. Harrison immediately began organizing a counterattack. Not to cross the bridge, that would be suicide, but to defend it, to establish positions on the near side that could cover the bridge and the approaches. He asked Sergeant Miller, "Can Martinez hold for another 30 minutes? I need time to get these men positioned." Miller looked through binoculars at the far side. He could see Joseph, still behind that wall, still alive. "Sir, I don't know, but if anyone can, it's Martinez." At 0705, German forces began probing again. Not a full assault, just testing. A squad of German soldiers moved forward using cover, trying to get closer to the bridge. Joseph let them come, waited until they were 40 yards away, then opened fire. 5 shots, 3 Germans fell, the others retreated. That pattern repeated for the next hour. Germans would probe, Joseph would fire, Germans would retreat. Each time, Joseph used fewer bullets. Each time he was more careful with his shots. By 0800, Joseph had 8 rounds left in his rifle. He'd already used his pistol once. A German soldier had gotten too close, and Joseph had shot him at 15 yards. 14 rounds left in the pistol now. He was also running low on water. He'd started the day with 2 canteens. One was empty. The other was half full, and it was getting hot. September sun, no shade. Joseph could feel his lips cracking. His throat was dry, but he couldn't leave. Not yet. At 8:15, German artillery opened fire. Not heavy artillery, mortars. Shells landed near Joseph's position. Not on it. The Germans wanted to take the bridge intact, but close enough to be terrifying. Joseph pressed himself against the wall. Shells exploded. Shrapnel flew. One fragment hit his helmet. Didn't penetrate, but the impact left his ears ringing. Another fragment cut his left arm, not deep, but painful. Blood soaked his sleeve. The mortar barrage lasted 10 minutes. When it stopped, Joseph checked himself. Cuts and bruises. His arm hurt. His head hurt. But he could still fight. At 0825, the real assault came. Germans came from 3 directions simultaneously, maybe 100 men. Not a probe. A full assault. They were trying to overwhelm Joseph's position and take the bridge before American reinforcements could stop them. Joseph fired his remaining 8 rounds from his rifle. Didn't miss. 8 shots. 8 Germans fell or took cover, but there were too many. They kept coming. He dropped his rifle, drew his pistol, fired as fast as he could aim. Germans were close now. 20 yards, 15 yards, too close. He emptied his pistol. 14 rounds gone, 2 Germans fell. The others kept coming. Joseph had no ammunition left, no grenades, nothing. He picked up rocks. Threw them at advancing Germans. It was futile, desperate, but he threw them anyway. Then American machine guns opened fire from the near side of the bridge. Browning M1919s, heavy, sustained fire. 30 caliber. Devastating. The Germans charging Joseph's position were caught in the open. Machine gun fire cut them down. Within 30 seconds, the assault collapsed. Germans fell back, dragged their wounded, left their dead. Joseph slumped against the wall. He was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. At 8:30, Captain Harrison's voice came over a loudspeaker. "Martinez, fall back! We've got you covered! Move now!" Joseph stood up. His legs were shaking, his hands were shaking. He'd been behind that wall for over 2 hours, fighting alone, holding hundreds of Germans back with nothing but grenades, bullets, and sheer determination. He started running toward the bridge. American machine guns provided covering fire. Mortars dropped smoke rounds to obscure German sightlines. Joseph ran through the smoke, across the bridge, back to American lines. Men cheered when he crossed. Medics rushed forward. But Joseph waved them off. "I'm fine, just need water." Someone handed him a canteen. He drank half of it in one gulp. Captain Harrison approached. Martinez, that was the bravest goddamn thing I've ever seen. You held that position for over 2 hours. Alone. You know how many Germans you kept from taking this bridge? Joseph shook his head. Intelligence estimates at least 400, maybe more. You, one man, stopped an entire German battalion from advancing. Do you understand what that means? Joseph didn't answer. He was too tired to think about what it meant. The battle for Bridge 7 continued for another 4 hours, but the critical moment had passed. American reinforcements had arrived. Defensive positions were established. German forces tried twice more to take the bridge, but were repelled both times. By 1400 hours, American forces launched a counterattack. They crossed the bridge in force, cleared the village, and pushed German forces back 3 miles. The bridge was secure. The cost was significant. Company B had taken 40% casualties. Other units involved in the fighting had similar losses. German casualties were estimated at over 200 killed or wounded, but the bridge was intact. The advance could continue. Supply lines could move forward. The war could progress, and it was all because one soldier had decided to stand his ground when he could have run. That evening, Joseph was sitting with what remained of his squad. 3 men. The squad had started the day with 12. Sergeant Miller sat down next to him. Martinez, Captain wants to put you in for a medal. Distinguished Service Cross, probably. Maybe Medal of Honor. Joseph shook his head. I don't want a medal, Sarge. I just did what needed to be done. That's exactly why you deserve a medal. You didn't do it for glory. You did it because it needed to be done. Because if you hadn't, a lot more men would be dead right now. Joseph looked at the bridge. In the fading light, it looked peaceful. Just a stone bridge over a small river. Nothing special. How many grenades did you have? Miller asked. 6. And you stopped 400 Germans with 6 grenades. I stopped them for a few minutes. Then I had my rifle, my pistol. Then I had rocks. Then you guys opened fire and saved my ass, Miller laughed. 6 grenades, 48 rifle rounds, 15 pistol rounds and rocks. Against 400 Germans. For 2 hours. Jesus Christ, Martinez. You know that's impossible, right? Can't be impossible. I did it. Yeah, you did. 3 weeks later, Joseph received the Distinguished Service Cross. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy. Private First Class Joseph Martinez distinguished himself by exceptionally valorous actions during an engagement with German forces. When his platoon was forced to retreat under heavy fire, Private Martinez voluntarily remained in an exposed position to cover the withdrawal. Armed only with grenades and personal weapons, he engaged a German force estimated at 400 soldiers, holding his position for over 2 hours, despite overwhelming odds. His actions prevented the enemy from capturing a vital bridge and allowed American forces to establish defensive positions. His courage and determination reflect the highest traditions of military service. Joseph's mother received a copy of the citation. She kept it in a frame on her wall for the rest of her life, but she told friends, "The army can give him medals, but I just want him home alive." Joseph survived the war. He came home in 1945. He never talked much about September 17, 1944. When people asked, he'd say, "I did my job, that's all." But the men who served with him remembered. Sergeant Miller, who survived the war and became a teacher, would tell his students, "I saw a lot of brave men during the war, but the bravest thing I ever saw was one soldier, alone, holding back an entire German battalion with nothing but 6 grenades and sheer guts. That's not courage. That's something beyond courage." The German forces that attacked Bridge 7 were from the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division. They'd been retreating for weeks, low on supplies, low on ammunition, exhausted, but still dangerous. Hauptmann, Captain Friedrich Steiner, commanded the battalion that attacked the bridge. In his after-action report, captured by American forces months later. He described the engagement. At 06:25 hours, elements of our battalion engaged American forces that had crossed the bridge at Objective 7. Initial contact was successful. American forces began retreating. We moved to cut off their withdrawal and capture the bridge. At approximately 06:30 hours, our advance was halted by an American soldier in a defensive position covering the bridge approach. This soldier engaged our forces with grenades and small arms fire. We assumed he was part of a larger defensive force and proceeded cautiously. Multiple attempts to advance were repelled. The American soldier demonstrated exceptional marksmanship and tactical awareness. We brought up additional forces, eventually committing 2 full companies to this engagement. Despite overwhelming numerical superiority, we were unable to advance past this position for over 2 hours. American artillery and machine gun fire from across the river prevented flanking maneuvers. At 08:30 hours, we launched a final assault with approximately 100 men advancing simultaneously. This assault was repelled with heavy casualties. We subsequently withdrew to reorganize. Final assessment. 1 American soldier, armed with grenades and personal weapons, successfully delayed a battalion-strength force for over 2 hours. His actions prevented us from capturing the bridge and allowed American forces to establish a strong defensive position. I have never encountered such determined resistance from a single soldier. Steiner survived the war. In the 1960s, he was interviewed by a military historian. The historian asked him about the bridge engagement. "That American soldier," Steiner said, "was either the bravest man I ever encountered or the craziest. Maybe both. He should have run, he should have retreated. Instead, he stayed and fought. Alone. Against impossible odds. In the Wehrmacht, we prided ourselves on discipline and courage, but what that American did, that was beyond anything I'd seen before." "Did you ever learn his name?" the historian asked. "No. After the war, I tried to find out. I wrote to American military archives. I wanted to know who he was. I don't know. Thank him, acknowledge what he did, but I never found out." The historian consulted his notes. His name was Joseph Martinez, Private First Class. He received the Distinguished Service Cross. He survived the war and lived until 1998. Steiner was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Joseph Martinez, I'm glad he survived, and I'm glad we didn't kill him. Some men deserve to live through wars. He was one of them." After the war, military tacticians studied the Bridge 7 engagement. It became a case study in individual initiative and defensive tactics. The U.S. Army Infantry School at Fort Benning included the engagement in their curriculum. The key teaching points were: 1. Initiative. Joseph Martinez recognized the tactical situation and acted without orders. He understood that holding the bridge approach would give his unit time to establish defenses. 2. Resource management. With limited ammunition, Martinez carefully selected targets and conserved rounds. He didn't panic fire. Each shot was deliberate. 3. Psychological impact. The presence of a single determined defender created uncertainty among German forces. They assumed they were facing a larger force and proceeded cautiously. 4. Terrain utilization. Martinez selected good cover, a stone wall that protected him from direct fire while allowing him to observe and engage enemy forces. 5. Courage under fire. Despite being outnumbered, outgunned and alone, Martinez maintained his position and continued fighting. But the engagement also raised questions. How does one soldier hold back 400? What were the psychological factors at play? Why didn't German forces simply overwhelm his position? A military psychologist at West Point analyzed the engagement in a 1952 paper titled Individual Heroism and Mass Hesitation, the Bridge 7 Case Study. The paper concluded German forces were not defeated by superior firepower or tactical brilliance. They were delayed by uncertainty. When Hauptmann Steiner's battalion encountered resistance from Martinez's position, they could not determine the size of the defending force. Grenades suggested multiple defenders. Accurate rifle fire suggested trained soldiers in prepared positions. The Germans proceeded cautiously, bringing up additional forces, organizing proper assaults, all of which took time. Martinez's psychological advantage was not his firepower, but his unpredictability. German forces had been trained to fight against organized resistance. They understood how to assault prepared positions, how to flank defensive lines, how to coordinate attacks. But they had no doctrine for assaulting a single soldier who refused to retreat. His mere presence created enough doubt to delay a battalion-strength force for over 2 hours. This case demonstrates that courage, when properly applied at the right time and place, can have tactical impact far beyond what numerical analysis would suggest. One man cannot defeat 400 in direct combat, but one man can delay 400 long enough to change the tactical situation. The paper was widely read in military circles. It influenced training doctrine. It changed how officers thought about individual initiative and defensive tactics. But for Joseph Martinez, it was much simpler. In a 1985 interview, one of the few he gave, a reporter asked him, "When you were behind that wall, alone, facing hundreds of German soldiers, what were you thinking?" Joseph thought about it. "I wasn't thinking about tactics or strategy or any of that. I was thinking, if I run, they take the bridge. If they take the bridge, more Americans die. So I stayed. That's all I stayed, because running meant other men would die." "Were you afraid?" "Terrified. The whole time. I thought I was going to die. I thought every minute would be my last. But fear doesn't change what needs to be done. You do your job whether you're afraid or not." "Do you consider yourself a hero?" Joseph shook his head. "No. Heroes are men who died. I survived. I'm just a soldier who did his job." Joseph Martinez returned to civilian life in 1945. He married his high school sweetheart, Maria, in 1946. They had 3 children. He worked as a carpenter. He lived in a small town in New Mexico. He rarely spoke about the war. His Distinguished Service Cross hung in a box in his closet. He never displayed it. When friends asked about it, he'd say, "That's from another life. This is my life now." But every September 17th, without fail, Joseph would take the day off work. He'd go to the local church. He'd light candles, 14 candles, one for each man from his platoon who didn't make it back across the bridge that day. Maria asked him once, "Why 14 candles? Why not one for everyone who died in the war?" "Because," Joseph said, "those 14 men died so I could live. They crossed that bridge first. They took the fire. They gave me time. I owe them. Lighting candles is the least I can do." In 1994, 50 years after the battle, Joseph was invited to a reunion of the 23rd Infantry Regiment. He almost didn't go. He didn't like attention, didn't like being called a hero, but Maria convinced him. "You should go, see your friends, remember together." Joseph went. The reunion was in Washington, D.C. About 200 veterans attended. Most were in their 70s, gray-haired, moving slowly. But when they saw each other, they were young again, brothers again. On the second day of the reunion, there was a ceremony. The regiment's historian gave a presentation about significant engagements. When he got to Bridge 7, he asked Joseph to stand. Joseph stood reluctantly. The room erupted in applause. 200 veterans, men who'd fought in Normandy, in the Ardennes, across Germany, stood and applauded one of their own. The historian said, "Joseph Martinez represents what every soldier hopes to be. Brave when it matters, determined when facing impossible odds, selfless when others need him." On September 17, 1944, one man held a bridge against 400 enemy soldiers, not because he was ordered to, but because it was the right thing to do. That's the spirit that won the war. That's the spirit that defines the greatest generation. Joseph's eyes were wet. He didn't cry often, but standing there, seeing these men, his brothers, acknowledging what happened 50 years ago, it overwhelmed him. After the ceremony, a younger man approached Joseph, maybe 40 years old. He introduced himself. "Mr. Martinez, I'm David Harrison. Captain William Harrison was my father. He commanded your company at Bridge 7. Joseph remembered Captain Harrison. Good officer, died in the Ardennes in December 1944. David continued, "My father wrote letters home during the war. In one letter, dated September 20th, 1944, he wrote about you. He said, 'Today I witnessed the bravest act I've ever seen. One of my soldiers held a position against impossible odds. He saved dozens of lives, including my own. I don't know if he'll get the recognition he deserves, but I'll remember him forever. His name is Joseph Martinez, and he's the kind of soldier that makes me proud to command.'" Joseph didn't know what to say. He'd never known Captain Harrison had written that. David handed Joseph a copy of the letter. "I thought you should have this. My father died 3 months after writing it, but he never forgot what you did, and neither should anyone else." Joseph took the letter. He read it. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. "Thank you," Joseph said quietly. "Your father was a good man. I'm sorry he didn't make it home." "So am I," David said. "But because of men like you, some did make it home. That matters." Joseph Martinez died in 1998 at the age of 77. Heart attack, quick, painless. At his funeral, the army sent an honor guard. They performed a 3-volley salute. They presented the flag to Maria. And then something unexpected happened. An old man stepped forward. He was German. Thick accent. He introduced himself as Friedrich Steiner, the German officer who had commanded the battalion at Bridge 7. He'd traveled from Germany for the funeral. He'd learned about Joseph's death from a military history newsletter. Steiner approached Maria. "Mrs. Martinez, I fought against your husband in 1944. He was my enemy then. But I want you to know he was the bravest enemy I ever encountered. He earned my respect that day, and he kept it for 54 years. I am honored to pay my respects." Maria didn't know what to say. This German officer, her husband's enemy, had traveled thousands of miles to honor him. Steiner continued, "In Germany we have a saying, Ehre dem Ehre gebührt. Honor to whom honor is due. Your husband deserved honor. He was a warrior, a true warrior. I salute his memory." Steiner saluted, a crisp military salute, held it for 5 seconds, then lowered his hand. Maria thanked him. They spoke for a few minutes. Steiner told her about the bridge, about how one American soldier had stopped his entire battalion, about how he'd searched for years to learn Joseph's name. "Your husband," Steiner said, "taught me something important. He taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what must be done despite being afraid. That lesson stayed with me my whole life." After Steiner left, Maria opened Joseph's old footlocker, the one he'd kept in the basement, the one with his uniform, his medals, his memories. She found a journal. Joseph had kept notes during the war, brief entries, dates, locations, events. The entry for September 17th, 1944 was longer than most. It said, "Today I held a bridge, don't know how long, felt like hours. Germans kept coming, I kept fighting, thought I would die, didn't. Others died instead. 14 men, good men. I think about them tonight, about why I lived and they died. No good answer, just grateful and guilty, always guilty, but grateful." That was Joseph Martinez, brave beyond measure, humble beyond understanding. A soldier who did the impossible because it needed to be done. 1 man, 1 bridge, 6 hours, 400 German soldiers stopped by, 6 grenades, 48 rifle rounds, 15 pistol rounds, and a determination that would not break. That's not just heroism. That's legend, and legends never die.